Picture this. A young boy stands in a field during a thunderstorm, watching lightning tear across the sky with wonder rather than fear. While other children cower indoors, he feels something stirring within him, a connection to the very forces that dance above. This boy would grow up to harness electricity in ways that would change the world forever. His name was Nikola Tesla, and his story is one of the most extraordinary journeys of human genius ever recorded. Tonight, as the world settles into quiet and your mind prepares for rest, let me take you on a journey through the life of a man who saw beyond the ordinary, who dreamed in frequencies and voltages, who spoke to the very essence of energy itself. This is not just the story of an inventor. It is the story of a mind so brilliant, so unusual, that it still puzzles us more than a century later. Tesla's tale begins not in the laboratories of the future, but in the mountains of what is now Croatia, where the air crackles with electricity and storms sweep across the landscape with breathtaking power. It was here, in this land where nature displays its electrical fury so dramatically, that the foundation was laid for discoveries that would illuminate the entire world. But Tesla was more than just a scientist. He was a dreamer who saw visions of wireless communication decades before the first radio broadcast. He was an artist of electricity who painted with currents and voltages. He was a philosopher who believed technology should serve humanity, not enslave it. And perhaps most remarkably, he was a man who lived so far ahead of his time that many of his ideas seemed like magic to those around him. As we embark on this exploration together, prepare to discover a mind unlike any other. A mind that could visualize complex machines in perfect detail without ever putting pencil to paper. A mind that could see the invisible forces flowing through our world and learn to conduct them like a symphony. A mind that would give us the very electrical grid that powers the device you are listening to right now. So settle back, let your breathing slow, and allow yourself to be transported to a world where science and imagination dance together, where the impossible becomes inevitable, and where one man's extraordinary vision changed the course of human history forever. Nikola Tesla was born on July 10th, 1856, in the village of Smiljan, nestled in the mountainous region of the Austrian Empire that we now know as Croatia. The exact moment of his birth carries an almost mythical quality that would foreshadow the extraordinary nature of his entire life. As the story goes, Tesla entered this world precisely at the stroke of midnight, during one of the most violent thunderstorms the region had ever witnessed. Lightning split the darkness as his first cries echoed through the small family home. The midwife, startled by the electrical fury raging outside, is said to have declared that the child would be a child of darkness, born under such an ominous sky. But Tesla's mother, Juka, looked at her newborn son and whispered with quiet certainty, "No, he will be a child of light." How prophetic those words would prove to be. The woman who spoke them was herself no ordinary person. Nikola Tesla possessed an inventive mind that would deeply influence her son's future. Though she could not read or write, her hands could create mechanical wonders. She crafted tools and household devices with an intuitive understanding of how things worked, how forces could be harnessed and redirected to serve practical purposes. Young Nikola would spend countless hours watching his mother's hands as they worked, observing how she approached problems with a combination of imagination and methodical thinking. She had an almost supernatural ability to memorize vast amounts of information, reciting epic Serbian poems that could take hours to complete. This extraordinary memory, this capacity to hold complex patterns in her mind, would become one of Tesla's most remarkable gifts. His father, Milutin Tesla, was an Orthodox priest, a man of learning and contemplation, who filled their home with books and philosophical discussions. The contrast between his parents was striking. His mother worked with her hands, creating and building. His father worked with words and ideas, exploring the mysteries of faith and human nature. Tesla inherited both gifts, becoming a man who could envision the most complex technical innovations while also pondering the deeper meaning of existence itself. The Tesla family home sat in a landscape that seemed designed to nurture an electrical genius. The region was famous for its spectacular thunderstorms, where lightning would cascade down from the mountains in displays that could last for hours. Most children learned to fear these storms, but young Nikola was mesmerized by them. He would stand at the windows, pressing his face against the glass, watching the electrical violence unfold across the sky with the fascination that other children reserved for fairy tales. During one particularly intense storm when he was just 5 years old, something remarkable happened. As Tesla later recalled, he was petting the family cat, Macaque, when his hand began to produce sparks. The cat's fur, charged with static electricity from the dry air and atmospheric conditions, created a light show that danced between Tesla's fingers and the animal's coat. His father, witnessing this phenomenon, explained that it was the same force that powered the lightning outside. In that moment, a connection formed in young Tesla's mind that would define his entire life. The spark between his hand and the cat was the same essential force as the magnificent bolts splitting the sky. Electricity was not some distant, incomprehensible phenomenon. It was immediate, touchable, controllable. This realization planted a seed that would grow into an obsession with understanding and mastering the electrical forces that govern our world. Tesla's childhood was marked by experiences that revealed the unusual nature of his developing mind. He possessed what he would later describe as an almost photographic memory, capable of storing incredibly detailed images and recalling them with perfect clarity years later. But more than simple memorization, his mind seemed to operate like a sophisticated laboratory where he could conduct experiments entirely in his imagination. By the age of 6, he had already begun what would become his most remarkable mental ability. He could design complex machines entirely in his thoughts, visualizing every component, every gear, every wire with absolute precision. Then, in his mind's eye, he could set these imaginary machines in motion, observing how they operated, identifying potential problems, and refining the design without ever touching a single physical component. This extraordinary capacity for mental visualization meant that Tesla could solve engineering problems that stumped other inventors who relied on physical prototypes and trial and error. While they built and rebuilt, tested and retested, Tesla perfected his designs in the laboratory of his mind before ever constructing a physical version. His early education took place primarily in the small village school in Smiljan, but it quickly became apparent that conventional teaching methods were inadequate for his unusual intellect. Teachers were both impressed and puzzled by a student who could solve complex mathematical problems in his head faster than others could work them out on paper. He demonstrated an intuitive grasp of physics principles that seemed to come from somewhere beyond his formal education. When Tesla was 7 years old, his family moved to the nearby town of Gospic, where his father had been assigned to a new parish. This move exposed the young boy to a broader world of ideas and possibilities. The town had a library, and Tesla devoured books on science, mathematics, and engineering. But perhaps more importantly, it was in Gospic that he first encountered detailed descriptions of electrical phenomena. He read about the experiments of Benjamin Franklin, learning how the American had proven that lightning was electrical in nature. He studied the work of Alessandro Volta, understanding how chemical reactions could produce steady electrical currents. Each new piece of knowledge was like adding another component to the vast electrical machine he was building in his mind. But Tesla's childhood was not without its challenges. He suffered from what appeared to be a series of unusual sensitivities and compulsions that would today perhaps be recognized as aspects of a neurological condition. Bright lights could cause him intense discomfort. Certain sounds seemed to penetrate his consciousness with unusual intensity. He developed elaborate rituals around eating and cleaning that he felt compelled to follow precisely. These peculiarities, rather than limiting him, seemed to contribute to his extraordinary focus and attention to detail. Where others might see random noise, Tesla perceived patterns. Where others experienced the world as a comfortable blur of sensations, Tesla felt every detail with startling clarity. This heightened sensitivity to his environment would later prove crucial in his ability to detect and work with subtle electrical phenomena that escaped the notice of other researchers. As he grew older, Tesla's fascination with mechanical devices expanded beyond electrical phenomena. He became captivated by the idea of perpetual motion, spending countless hours trying to design machines that could run forever without external energy input. Though these early attempts were unsuccessful, they taught him valuable lessons about energy conservation and the fundamental principles that govern all mechanical systems. By his teenage years, Tesla had already begun to display the characteristics that would define his entire approach to invention. He was methodical, yet imaginative, practical, yet visionary. He could see beyond the immediate problem to envision solutions that others considered impossible. And perhaps most importantly, he had developed an unshakable belief that the forces of nature could be understood, harnessed, and directed to serve human needs. The boy who had once stood in wonder at lightning storms was growing into a young man who believed he could capture that very lightning and make it work for humanity. The stage was being set for discoveries that would transform the world, innovations that would bring light to darkness and power to the farthest reaches of civilization. But first, he would need to leave the mountains of his birth and venture into the wider world, where his extraordinary gifts would be tested, challenged, and ultimately unleashed upon a world that was not quite ready for the revolutionary changes he would bring. The path that would lead Tesla from his mountain village to the great centers of learning was not a straight one. As he approached his final years of secondary education, the question of his future became a source of considerable tension within the Tesla household. His father, the devoted priest Milutin, harbored dreams of his brilliant son following in his footsteps, entering the seminary and dedicating his life to spiritual service. But Tesla's heart and mind were already committed to a different calling, one that would require him to pursue the emerging sciences of electricity and engineering. The conflict between father and son simmered quietly at first, expressed more through meaningful glances and careful conversations than open confrontation. Milutin could see his son's extraordinary gifts, but he struggled to understand how these talents might be channeled into what he considered a proper profession. The priesthood offered stability, respect, and the opportunity to serve others. Engineering seemed uncertain, perhaps even frivolous by comparison. Tesla, meanwhile, found himself torn between filial duty and the irresistible pull of his true passion. He spent long evenings walking the hills around Gospish, wrestling with the decision that would shape the rest of his life. During these solitary wanderings, he would often pause to observe the electrical phenomena that continued to fascinate him. The way light behaved as it struck different surfaces, the patterns formed by magnetic iron filings, the subtle currents that seemed to flow through all living things. It was during one of these evening walks that Tesla experienced what he would later describe as a vision that changed everything. He was reciting passages from Goethe's Faust, a work that had captured his imagination with its themes of human ambition and the pursuit of forbidden knowledge. As he spoke the words about the setting sun and the eternal light that burns within, something extraordinary happened in his mind. Suddenly, with startling clarity, he could see a rotating magnetic field spinning before his inner eye. Not just the concept of such a field, but the actual mechanism that could create it, complete in every detail. He saw how alternating currents, properly phased and directed, could produce a magnetic field that rotated smoothly in space. And in that rotating field, he envisioned a motor that would run without the sparking, inefficient brushes that plagued all existing electrical motors. The vision was so vivid, so complete, that Tesla immediately began sketching diagrams in the dirt with a stick. His companion on this walk, a friend who had been listening to the poetry recitation, watched in bewilderment as Tesla frantically drew circles and arrows, muttering about magnetic fields and rotating currents. Tesla tried to explain what he had seen, but the concepts were so far beyond current electrical understanding that his words seemed like the ravings of a madman. But Tesla knew what he had witnessed. In that moment of inspiration, he had glimpsed the solution to one of the greatest challenges in electrical engineering. The motors of his time were crude, inefficient devices that required constant maintenance and produced irregular power. But a motor based on a rotating magnetic field would be smooth, reliable, and incredibly efficient. It would be the key to making alternating current practical for widespread use. This revelation crystallized Tesla's determination to pursue his studies in engineering, regardless of his father's wishes. He had been granted a glimpse of the future, and he knew that his destiny lay not in the pulpit, but in the laboratory. The very forces that had danced across the skies of his childhood were calling him to unlock their secrets and share their power with the world. When Tesla finally announced his intention to study engineering rather than theology, the confrontation with his father was as intense as he had feared. Milutin Tesla was a man of deep convictions, and he could not understand how his son could turn away from what he saw as a higher calling. The arguments continued for weeks, with Tesla's mother, Juka, often serving as a mediator between the two strong-willed men. The resolution came in an unexpected way. Tesla fell seriously ill with cholera, a disease that was sweeping through the region and claiming many lives. For days, he lay near death, his fever so high that he often became delirious. His parents maintained a constant vigil, fearing they might lose their brilliant son just as he stood on the threshold of adulthood. During one of his lucid moments, Tesla made what seemed like a dying request. He asked his father to promise that if he recovered, he would be allowed to study engineering. Milutin Tesla, faced with the possibility of losing his son entirely, agreed. The fever broke the next day, and Tesla began a slow but steady recovery. True to his word, his father never again opposed his son's chosen path. The recovery was not just physical, but seemed to mark a spiritual transformation as well. Tesla emerged from his illness with an even more intense focus on his electrical studies. It was as if the brush with death had burned away any remaining doubts about his purpose in life. He knew, with absolute certainty, that he was meant to dedicate himself to understanding and harnessing the electrical forces of nature. His preparation for advanced study became almost obsessive in its intensity. Tesla threw himself into mathematics and physics with a dedication that amazed his teachers and worried his family. He would study late into the night, often forgetting to eat or sleep as he worked through complex problems. His visualization abilities continued to develop, allowing him to construct and test elaborate mental experiments that explored the behavior of electrical currents under different conditions. The time had come for Tesla to leave his mountain home and seek the education that would prepare him for his extraordinary destiny. In 1875, at the age of 19, he enrolled at the Austrian Polytechnic in Graz, one of the most prestigious technical schools in the empire. This institution would provide him with the rigorous scientific foundation he needed to transform his visionary insights into practical reality. But Tesla's years at the Polytechnic would prove to be far more challenging than he had anticipated. While his intellectual gifts were undeniable, his unusual personality and unconventional thinking would put him at odds with professors who preferred students to follow established methods rather than question fundamental assumptions. The young man, who could design perfect machines in his mind, would struggle to conform to the rigid academic structures that governed formal engineering education. The stage was set for conflicts that would shape not only Tesla's character, but his entire approach to innovation. He would learn that true genius often requires not just brilliant insights, but the courage to stand against conventional wisdom, even when such defiance comes at great personal cost. The The boy who had once watched lightning storms with wonder was about to discover that the path to harnessing those forces would require him to weather storms of a very different kind. The Austrian Polytechnic in Graz stood as a monument to the precision and order that characterized Germanic engineering education. Its imposing stone buildings housed some of the finest minds in the empire, professors who had dedicated their lives to the methodical advancement of technical knowledge. Into this world of rigid academic hierarchy and established protocols came Nikola Tesla, a young man whose mind operated according to principles that no textbook had ever described. From his very first day, Tesla distinguished himself in ways that both impressed and unsettled his instructors. While other students labored over complex mathematical calculations, covering pages with careful workings, Tesla would arrive at solutions almost instantaneously, his extraordinary mental abilities allowing him to perform calculations that others required slide rules and extensive written work to complete. His professors watched in amazement as he solved differential equations in his head, but their admiration was tempered by unease at methods they could not understand or verify. The friction began almost immediately in his electrical engineering courses. When Professor Puschel demonstrated a new direct current motor, Tesla's keen eye immediately spotted its fundamental inefficiencies. The device required brushes that created sparks as they made and broke contact with the rotating armature, resulting in energy loss, noise, and the need for constant maintenance. As the professor explained how this represented the pinnacle of motor design, Tesla raised his hand. "Professor," he said with the confidence that would characterize his entire career, "I believe it would be possible to operate a motor without brushes, using alternating current to create a rotating magnetic field." The classroom fell silent. Professor Puschel, a respected authority who had devoted decades to the study of electrical machines, looked at his young student with a mixture of amusement and irritation. "Mr. Tesla," the professor replied with barely concealed condescension, "you may be able to accomplish many things, but you will never make alternating current practical for motors. It would be equivalent to converting a steadily pulling force into a rotating one, something like trying to make a clock work by pulling on the pendulum. It is a perpetual motion scheme, an impossible idea." The public rebuke stung Tesla deeply, not because he doubted his vision, but because he could not yet prove his professor wrong. The rotating magnetic field motor that he had seen so clearly in his mind during that evening walk in Gospish remained trapped in the realm of imagination. He knew it would work, could visualize every aspect of its operation with perfect clarity, but translating that mental certainty into physical reality would require knowledge and resources he did not yet possess. This incident marked the beginning of Tesla's complicated relationship with formal academic authority. He possessed insights that transcended conventional understanding, but the very institutions meant to nurture his development seemed determined to constrain his thinking within established boundaries. His professors valued incremental progress based on proven principles, while Tesla's mind leaped toward revolutionary solutions that seemed to violate fundamental laws. The tension affected every aspect of Tesla's academic experience. In mathematics courses, he would arrive at correct answers through intuitive leaps that his professors could not follow or validate. When asked to show his work, Tesla would attempt to reverse engineer the logical steps his mind had bypassed, often creating explanations that seemed more complex than the problems themselves. His unconventional approaches, while ultimately correct, violated the methodical procedures that form the foundation of engineering education. Physics laboratories presented their own challenges. Tesla's extraordinary sensitivity to electrical phenomena allowed him to detect subtle effects that escaped the notice of his classmates and even his instructors. He would observe variations in electrical behavior that measuring instruments could not register, leading to tensions when his observations conflicted with accepted experimental procedures. His professors began to view him as either remarkably gifted or dangerously prone to delusions of precision. The social aspects of university life proved equally difficult for Tesla. His unusual habits and compulsions, which had been manageable in the familiar environment of his family home, became more pronounced under the stress of academic competition. He developed elaborate rituals around his studies, requiring absolute quiet and specific lighting conditions to concentrate effectively. His fellow students, many from wealthy industrial families, found his intensity and peculiar behaviors increasingly off-putting. Tesla's appearance during this period reflected his internal struggles. Always tall and thin, he became almost gaunt as he threw himself into his studies with an intensity that left little time for proper meals or rest. His clothes, while always meticulously clean due to his obsessive attention to hygiene, hung loosely on his increasingly spare frame. His dark hair, which he kept precisely styled, contrasted sharply with his pale complexion, giving him an otherworldly appearance that reinforced his reputation as an eccentric. Despite these challenges, Tesla's academic performance in his first year was nothing short of extraordinary. He completed the curriculum in half the usual time, earning the highest possible marks in all his subjects. His professors wrote glowing reports about his mathematical abilities and his grasp of physical principles. One noted that Tesla seemed to possess an intuitive understanding of electrical phenomena that surpassed that of students who had been studying the subject for years. But success came at a tremendous personal cost. The constant pressure to conform to academic expectations while maintaining his faith in his own revolutionary insights created an internal tension that manifested in increasingly severe physical symptoms. Tesla began experiencing headaches that would last for days, accompanied by a heightened sensitivity to light and sound that made normal classroom activities almost unbearable. His visualization abilities, which had always been his greatest asset, began to take on an almost overwhelming intensity. The mental machines he could construct in his imagination became so vivid that they seemed more real than the physical world around him. He would spend hours in his room, eyes closed, watching complex mechanisms operate in his mind's eye with a clarity that surpassed any physical observation he had ever made. During his second year at the Polytechnic, these tensions reached a crisis point. Tesla's relationship with his professors had deteriorated as they grew increasingly frustrated with his refusal to follow conventional procedures. His fellow students had largely ostracized him, viewing his intensity and unusual behaviors as signs of instability. The isolation was compounded by financial pressures, as his family's resources were stretched thin by the costs of his education. The breaking point came during a particularly heated exchange with Professor Poschel over alternating current motors. Tesla had continued to refine his mental designs for the rotating magnetic field motor, and he attempted once again to explain his vision to his professor. Poschel not only dismissed the idea, but suggested that Tesla's persistence in pursuing impossible schemes indicated a fundamental misunderstanding of electrical principles. The confrontation left Tesla shaken and questioning everything about his academic path. That evening, he walked through the streets of Graz for hours, his mind churning with doubt and frustration. The confidence that had sustained him through his childhood and early academic success began to crack under the weight of constant opposition from those he had expected to support his development. As he wandered through the quiet city, Tesla found himself at a crossroads that would define the rest of his life. He could surrender his revolutionary visions and conform to the expectations of conventional electrical engineering, ensuring a respectable but unremarkable career. Or he could maintain his faith in insights that seemed to violate everything his professors considered possible, knowing that such a path would likely lead to continued isolation and professional rejection. Standing beneath a street lamp in the center of Graz, Tesla made a decision that would change the course of technological history. He would trust his visions, regardless of the personal cost. The rotating magnetic field motor that lived in his imagination would one day power the world, and no amount of academic opposition would deter him from that destiny. But first, he would need to find a different path to knowledge, one that valued innovation over conformity and revolutionary thinking over incremental progress. The formal academic world had shown him its limitations. Now he would need to seek his education in the laboratories of industry, where practical results mattered more than theoretical orthodoxy. The young man who had once recited poetry while envisioning rotating magnetic fields was about to embark on a journey that would take him far from the safe halls of academia into a world where genius was measured not by grades or professional approval, but by the ability to transform impossible dreams into revolutionary reality. Tesla's departure from the Polytechnic was not the dramatic rebellion that some biographers have suggested, but rather a gradual disengagement from an environment that could no longer nurture his extraordinary gifts. As his second year progressed, he found himself spending less time in formal classes and more time in independent study, pursuing lines of inquiry that his professors considered irrelevant or impossible. The final break came when Tesla realized that he had already absorbed everything the institution could teach him about electrical engineering, while the revolutionary insights that burned within his mind remained incomprehensible to those who were supposed to guide his development. He had outgrown the very system that was meant to prepare him for his career, and continuing to pretend otherwise served no purpose for anyone involved. Without ceremony or explanation, Tesla simply stopped attending classes. He gathered his few possessions, said goodbye to the handful of fellow students who had shown him any kindness, and left Graz behind. The mountain boy who had once watched lightning storms with wonder was ready to venture into a larger world, where the electrical forces he understood so intimately would finally find their proper expression. Tesla's journey from the familiar confines of Graz led him into a period of wandering that would test every fibre of his character. The young man who left the Polytechnic carried with him nothing but the clothes on his back, a mind filled with revolutionary visions, and an unshakable belief that his destiny lay beyond the conventional paths that others expected him to follow. His first destination was Maribor, a smaller city where he hoped to find practical work that would allow him to support himself while continuing his electrical experiments. The transition from student to working man proved more difficult than he had anticipated. Tesla's unusual appearance and intense demeanor made potential employers wary, and his lack of formal credentials closed doors that might have opened for a conventional engineering graduate. For several months, Tesla worked as a draftsman in a civil engineering office, spending his days creating technical drawings for mundane construction projects. The work was steady, but soul-crushing for a man whose mind contained visions of electrical marvels that could transform civilization. During his lunch breaks, he would retreat to quiet corners where he could continue his mental experiments, refining the rotating magnetic field motor that had become his obsession. His evenings were spent in a different kind of laboratory entirely. Tesla had discovered that the local gambling halls offered a peculiar form of intellectual stimulation. The mathematical principles underlying games of chance fascinated him, and his extraordinary memory and analytical abilities gave him significant advantages over other players. For a time, his winnings provided enough income to support his basic needs while he searched for more suitable employment. But Tesla's relationship with gambling revealed another aspect of his complex personality. He approached the games with the same obsessive intensity that he brought to everything else, studying probability theory and developing elaborate systems for predicting outcomes. When he won, which was often, the money meant little to him beyond its practical utility. When he lost, however, the setback consumed his thoughts with an intensity that bordered on the pathological. The gambling period ended abruptly when Tesla realized that his obsession with the games was distracting him from his true purpose. In a characteristic display of the iron will that would define his entire career, he walked away from the tables permanently, even though he was ahead financially. The money had been useful, but it was not worth the cost to his intellectual focus. Word of Tesla's unusual talents eventually reached Milutin Antolokci, the chief engineer of the Central Telegraph Company in Budapest. Antolokci was a Hungarian inventor who had heard rumors of a brilliant young engineer with revolutionary ideas about electrical systems. When the two men met, Antoloxi immediately recognized that Tesla possessed insights that could prove invaluable to his company's operations. The position in Budapest offered Tesla his first real opportunity to work with sophisticated electrical equipment in a professional setting. The Central Telegraph Company was responsible for maintaining communication lines across a vast region, and the technical challenges were both complex and constantly evolving. Tesla threw himself into the work with characteristic intensity, quickly mastering every aspect of the company's operations. But more importantly, the job provided him with access to the electrical components and measuring instruments he needed to begin translating his mental experiments into physical reality. Working late into the night in the company's workshops, Tesla began constructing the first crude prototypes of devices that had existed only in his imagination. His colleagues watched with fascination as Tesla worked with an unusual methodology that seemed to violate everything they had learned about engineering development. While other inventors built multiple prototypes, testing and modifying each version through trial and error, Tesla would construct a single device that worked perfectly on the first attempt. When asked how he achieved such precision, Tesla would explain that he had already tested the design thoroughly in his mind, identifying and correcting every potential flaw before touching a single component. The mental laboratory that Tesla had developed during his childhood had evolved into something that transcended normal human capabilities. He could visualize mechanical systems with such extraordinary detail that he could observe the wear patterns on moving parts after they had operated for weeks in his imagination. This ability to accelerate time in his mental simulations allowed him to test designs far more thoroughly than any physical prototype could demonstrate. During his time in Budapest, Tesla made his first significant breakthrough in practical electrical engineering. While working on improvements to the company's telephone exchange system, he developed an amplifier that could boost weak signals traveling over long distances. The device was elegant in its simplicity, using principles of electromagnetic induction that Tesla understood intuitively, but that seemed mysterious to his colleagues. The success of the telephone amplifier established Tesla's reputation as an electrical engineer of exceptional ability. Word of his innovations began to spread through the small community of electrical pioneers who were working to develop practical applications for the mysterious forces that Tesla understood so well. But even as Tesla gained recognition for his conventional engineering work, his mind remained focused on the revolutionary motor design that had first come to him during that evening walk in Gospic. The rotating magnetic field concept had continued to evolve in his mental laboratory, becoming more refined and sophisticated with each passing month. The breakthrough he had been waiting for came during a walk through the city park in Budapest, accompanied by his friend Antoni Szigeti. Tesla was reciting passages from Goethe's Faust, the same work that had inspired his original vision of the rotating magnetic field. As he spoke the familiar words about the setting sun and eternal light, the final pieces of the puzzle suddenly fell into place in his mind. With startling clarity, Tesla could see exactly how to construct a motor based on alternating current that would operate without brushes or commutators. The solution involved using multiple phases of alternating current, each slightly out of step with the others, to create a magnetic field that rotated smoothly in space. A conductor placed within this rotating field would be induced to rotate as well, creating mechanical motion from electrical energy with unprecedented efficiency. Tesla immediately began sketching diagrams in the dirt with a stick, his excitement so intense that Szigeti feared his friend had suffered some kind of mental breakdown. The drawings showed a motor design unlike anything that had ever been conceived, with stationary windings arranged to create the rotating magnetic field and a simple rotor that would spin without any physical contact with the stationary parts. "Szigeti," Tesla exclaimed, his voice trembling with excitement. "See how smoothly it is running. Now I shall reverse its direction." And he showed his friend how the direction of rotation could be changed simply by altering the sequence of the alternating currents. The vision was so complete, so perfect in every detail, that Tesla knew he had solved one of the greatest challenges in electrical engineering. But he also understood that proving his concept to the world would require resources and opportunities that were not available to him in Budapest. The rotating magnetic field motor would revolutionize electrical power generation and transmission, making it practical to send electrical energy over vast distances with minimal loss. It would be the key to electrifying entire cities, powering industries, and bringing the benefits of electrical technology to every corner of civilization. But first, Tesla would need to find a way to build and demonstrate his revolutionary motor. The mental laboratory where he had perfected the design was invisible to others, and the electrical establishment would never accept his claims without physical proof. His thoughts turned to America, the young nation where bold innovations were welcomed, and where the race to develop practical electrical systems was reaching fever pitch. In the United States, inventors like Thomas Edison were building electrical empires, and there might be opportunities for a man with Tesla's extraordinary gifts. The decision to emigrate was not made lightly. Tesla would be leaving behind everything familiar, venturing into an unknown culture where he would have to prove himself once again. But the alternative was to remain in Europe, where the established electrical industry was dominated by direct current systems that Tesla knew were fundamentally flawed. As Tesla prepared for his journey to America, he carried with him letters of introduction from colleagues who recognized his genius, even if they could not fully comprehend the revolutionary nature of his ideas. More importantly, he carried in his mind the complete specifications for technologies that would transform the world, innovations that existed nowhere else in the universe except in the extraordinary laboratory of his imagination. The young man who had once stood in wonder at lightning storms was about to cross an ocean to pursue his destiny. In America, he would find the resources and opportunities he needed to share his electrical visions with humanity. But he would also discover that genius alone was not enough to guarantee success, and that the path to changing the world would test every aspect of his character in ways he had never imagined. The ship that would carry Tesla to his new life waited at the dock, its steam engines representing the very industrial forces that his electrical innovations would soon revolutionize. As he walked up the gangplank, Tesla carried nothing but a letter of introduction, a few mathematical calculations, and a mind filled with technologies that would power the 20th century. America beckoned with promises of opportunity and advancement. But Tesla could not have known that his greatest triumphs and his most bitter defeats all lay ahead of him in the land where dreams and nightmares often wore the same face. The boy who had been born during a lightning storm was about to enter the most electrifying chapter of his extraordinary life. The Atlantic crossing gave Tesla time to refine his plans and prepare for the challenges that awaited him in America. During the long days at sea, he continued his mental experiments, perfecting not only the rotating magnetic field motor, but also envisioning the complete electrical systems that would be needed to harness its revolutionary potential. He imagined power stations that could generate alternating current more efficiently than any existing facility, transmission lines that could carry electrical energy across vast distances with minimal loss, and distribution networks that could bring electricity to every home and business in the largest cities. But Tesla's visions extended even beyond these practical applications. As he stood on the ship's deck, watching the endless expanse of ocean stretch to the horizon, his mind conjured possibilities that seemed to border on magic. He envisioned wireless transmission of electrical power, communication systems that could span continents without wires, and technologies that could harness the electrical energy present in the Earth itself. These ideas were so far ahead of their time that Tesla knew better than to discuss them with his fellow passengers. The rotating magnetic field motor, revolutionary as it was, would be difficult enough for the American electrical establishment to accept. The more exotic possibilities would have to wait until he had established his credibility with proven innovations. As the ship approached New York Harbor, Tesla felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. He was entering a country where individual achievement was celebrated, and where bold innovations could quickly transform their inventors from obscurity to fame and fortune. But he was also aware that America's competitive business environment could be ruthless to those who failed to navigate its complexities successfully. The letter of introduction in his pocket was addressed to Thomas Edison, the famous inventor whose electrical systems were beginning to illuminate American cities. Tesla hoped that Edison would recognize the value of his alternating current innovations and provide the resources needed to develop them commercially. But as Tesla would soon discover, the meeting with Edison would set in motion a conflict that would define the entire future of electrical technology. Two brilliant minds, each convinced of the superiority of his own approach, would clash in a battle that would determine whether the world would be powered by direct current or alternating current. The stakes could not have been higher, and the outcome would affect every aspect of modern civilization. Tesla carried within his mind the seeds of the electrical age, but transforming those visions into reality would require him to navigate challenges that no amount of mental preparation could fully anticipate. The great adventure was about to begin, and the world would never be the same. The steamship that carried Tesla across the Atlantic docked at Castle Garden on a humid summer morning in 1884. As Tesla stepped onto American soil for the first time, the overwhelming sensory assault of New York City struck him like a physical blow. The cacophony of voices speaking in dozens of languages, the clatter of horse-drawn carriages over cobblestones, the smell of coal smoke and human activity concentrated in ways that his mountain-born senses had never experienced. Tesla stood for a moment on the dock, clutching his single piece of luggage, a worn leather satchel that contained everything he owned in the world. Inside were a few changes of clothes, his mathematical notebooks filled with calculations that no one else could decipher, and most importantly, the letter of introduction to Thomas Edison that represented his only connection to the American electrical industry. The young immigrant's appearance marked him immediately as foreign. His clothes, while meticulously clean, were of European cut and showed the wear of his long journey. His height made him stand out among the crowd, and his intense dark eyes seemed to take in every detail of his new environment with the focus of a scientist studying an unknown phenomenon. But perhaps most striking was his bearing, the unmistakable confidence of a man who carried within his mind innovations that would reshape the world. Tesla's first challenge was simply navigating the bewildering complexity of New York City. The streets seemed to follow no logical pattern, unlike the orderly grid systems he was accustomed to in European cities. The constant noise and movement threatened to overwhelm his sensitive nervous system, but he forced himself to focus on his immediate goal. He needed to find Thomas Edison. Edison's laboratory and offices were located in Lower Manhattan, and Tesla made his way through the crowded streets with the determination that would characterize his entire American experience. As he walked, he observed the primitive state of New York's electrical infrastructure. Gas lamps still dominated the lighting, with only scattered examples of Edison's direct current electric lights. The few electrical systems he could observe struck him as crude and inefficient compared to the alternating current technologies that lived in his imagination. When Tesla finally arrived at Edison's establishment, he was struck by the contrast between the modest exterior and the revolutionary work being conducted within. The building hummed with activity as inventors and technicians worked on dozens of different electrical projects. Arc lights blazed in the workshops, and the air crackled with the energy of innovation. Thomas Edison himself was unlike anyone Tesla had expected to encounter. Where Tesla was tall and aristocratic in bearing, Edison was stocky and informal. Where Tesla approached problems through theoretical understanding and mental visualization, Edison relied on exhaustive trial and error experimentation. The two men represented completely different philosophies of invention, and the tension was apparent from their first meeting. Edison examined Tesla's letter of introduction with interest. The recommendation came from Charles Batchelor, one of Edison's most trusted associates who had been managing Edison's operations in Paris. Batchelor had worked with Tesla briefly and had written that Tesla was a brilliant engineer who understood electrical theory better than almost anyone in Europe. "I know two great men," Batchelor had written, "and you are one of them. The other is this young man standing before you." Edison studied Tesla with the calculating gaze of a businessman evaluating a potential asset. The American inventor was already established as the most famous electrical pioneer in the world, with a growing empire of power stations and manufacturing facilities. But he was also practical enough to recognize talent when he saw it, and Tesla's credentials were impressive. "So you're the European who thinks he can improve on American electrical systems," Edison said, with the directness that characterized all his interactions. "What makes you think we need improvement?" Tesla's response revealed both his technical brilliance and his political naivety. Instead of diplomatic flattery, he launched into a detailed explanation of the fundamental flaws he perceived in direct current electrical systems. He described how direct current could not be transmitted efficiently over long distances, how it required heavy copper conductors that made large-scale electrical distribution prohibitively expensive, and how the low voltages necessitated by safety concerns severely limited the practical applications. Edison listened with growing irritation as this young immigrant criticized systems that had taken him years to develop and that were already generating substantial profits. But he was also intrigued by Tesla's obvious expertise and his confident claims about alternating current solutions that Edison considered impractical or impossible. "Young man," Edison finally interrupted, "alternating current is a waste of time. It's dangerous, it's unpredictable, and it will never be practical for commercial use. Direct current is the future of electrical power, and if you want to work for me, you'll need to focus on improving what we already have, rather than chasing impossible dreams." The exchange established the fundamental conflict that would define Tesla's relationship with Edison. Tesla had come to America expecting to find an electrical visionary who would immediately recognize the revolutionary potential of alternating current technology. Instead, he encountered a practical businessman who had invested too heavily in direct current systems to consider alternatives seriously. But Tesla needed work, and Edison's organization represented the most advanced electrical laboratory in America. Against his better judgment, Tesla accepted a position as one of Edison's engineers, hoping that he could gradually demonstrate the superiority of his alternating current concepts through practical results. The early months of Tesla's employment at Edison's laboratory were a period of intense productivity and growing frustration. Tesla threw himself into his assigned projects with characteristic intensity, quickly establishing himself as one of the most capable engineers in Edison's organization. His ability to solve complex technical problems with unprecedented speed and accuracy impressed even Edison's most experienced assistants. Tesla's first major assignment involved redesigning Edison's direct current generators to improve their efficiency and reduce their cost of manufacture. Where other engineers might have required months of experimental work, Tesla completed the project in a matter of weeks. His improvements were elegant and effective, demonstrating a grasp of electromagnetic principles that surpassed that of engineers with decades more experience. But even as Tesla excelled at his assigned tasks, he continued to advocate for alternating current development. During breaks in his official duties, he would sketch out designs for alternating current motors and generators, trying to interest his colleagues in the revolutionary possibilities he envisioned. Most dismissed his ideas as the impractical theories of a European dreamer who didn't understand American business realities. Edison himself remained adamantly opposed to any investigation of alternating current technology. His direct current systems were beginning to generate substantial revenues, and he saw no reason to risk those profits on unproven alternatives. More troubling for Tesla, Edison seemed to view his young employees' enthusiasm for alternating current as a form of disloyalty to the company's established direction. The tension came to a head when Tesla proposed a comprehensive redesign of Edison's entire electrical generation and distribution system, Tesla argued that alternating current could reduce the cost of electrical infrastructure by more than half while providing more reliable service to customers. He offered to develop a complete alternating current system if Edison would provide the necessary resources and support. Edison's response was characteristic of the man's practical focus on immediate profits rather than long-term innovation. "Tesla," he said, "if you can improve my direct current machines and make them more profitable, I'll pay you $50,000. But I'm not interested in wasting time and money on alternating current experiments that will never amount to anything commercial." $50,000 represented a fortune to Tesla, more money than he could expect to earn in years of conventional employment. More importantly, the challenge appealed to his engineer's pride. If he could demonstrate the improvements Edison requested, perhaps he could use that success to win support for his alternating current research. Tesla accepted the challenge and immediately began the most intensive period of invention in his career to that point. Working 18 hours a day, 7 days a week, he systematically redesigned every component of Edison's direct current system. He improved the generators, refined the voltage regulation systems, reduced the power losses in transmission, and enhanced the reliability of the electrical distribution networks. The results exceeded even Edison's optimistic expectations. Tesla's improvements reduced the cost of electrical generation by 30%, while increasing the reliability and efficiency of the entire system. The enhanced performance translated directly into increased profits for Edison's growing electrical empire. But when Tesla approached Edison to collect the promised $50,000 reward, he discovered a harsh lesson about American business practices. Edison claimed that the offer had been a joke, a way of motivating his young engineer to work harder on the improvements. "Tesla," Edison said with a laugh that carried no warmth, "you don't understand our American humor. When you become a full American, you will appreciate an American joke." The betrayal cut Tesla more deeply than any professional setback he had experienced. He had invested months of exhaustive effort in improving Edison's systems, sacrificing his health and his personal time to achieve results that had exceeded every requirement. In return, he had received not only financial betrayal, but public humiliation. Tesla's response was immediate and decisive. He resigned from Edison's laboratory that same day, walking away from the most prestigious electrical engineering position in America. As he cleared out his few personal possessions, Tesla vowed that he would never again allow financial dependence to compromise his scientific integrity. The break with Edison was more than a personal dispute between two inventors. It represented a fundamental philosophical divide about the future of electrical technology. Edison's direct current systems were profitable in the short term, but severely limited in their potential for large-scale application. Tesla's alternating current concepts offered revolutionary possibilities, but required significant investment and development before they could demonstrate their commercial value. Tesla left Edison's laboratory with nothing but his extraordinary knowledge and an unshakable belief in the revolutionary potential of alternating current technology. The young immigrant who had arrived in America with dreams of electrical innovation now found himself unemployed and virtually penniless in a foreign country. But Tesla's setback would prove to be the catalyst for developments that would transform the entire electrical industry. Free from the constraints of Edison's direct current orthodoxy, Tesla would finally have the opportunity to develop the alternating current technologies that had been perfecting in his mind for years. The stage was set for a battle between two competing visions of electrical power that would determine the technological foundation of modern civilization. On one side stood Edison, with his established direct current empire and his practical focus on immediate profits. On the other side stood Tesla, armed with revolutionary alternating current concepts that existed nowhere but in his extraordinary imagination. The war of the currents was about to begin, and the outcome would reshape not only the electrical industry, but the entire trajectory of technological development. Tesla's greatest triumphs and his most bitter disappointments all lay ahead of him. But first, he would need to survive the darkest period of his American experience. The winter of 1885 found Tesla in circumstances that would have broken a lesser man. His break with Edison had left him not only unemployed, but virtually unemployable within the established electrical industry. Word of his departure had spread quickly through the small community of electrical engineers in New York, and Edison's influence was sufficient to close many doors that might otherwise have opened for a man of Tesla's obvious talents. Tesla's financial situation became desperate with frightening speed. The modest savings he had accumulated during his months with Edison were quickly exhausted by the basic necessities of survival in expensive New York City. He was forced to move from his comfortable boarding house to increasingly shabby accommodations as his resources dwindled. The physical demands of his situation began to take a toll on Tesla's already fragile health. The combination of poor nutrition, inadequate shelter, and the constant stress of financial uncertainty triggered a return of the nervous symptoms that had plagued him since childhood. His sensitivity to light and sound became almost unbearable, making it difficult for him to concentrate on the technical problems that might have provided a path out of his difficulties. During this period, Tesla was forced to take whatever work he could find to survive. He dug ditches for the Edison Electric Light Company, a bitter irony that placed him in the employment of his former employer's organization while performing manual labor far beneath his qualifications. The work was physically demanding and paid barely enough to cover his most basic needs. His fellow ditch diggers had no idea that the tall, thin immigrant working beside them carried in his mind the complete specifications for electrical technologies that would revolutionize modern civilization. Tesla's pride prevented him from discussing his background or his capabilities with men who would not have understood the significance of his innovations even if he had explained them. But even in these desperate circumstances, Tesla's mind continued to work on the technical challenges that had defined his entire career. During his lunch breaks, he would retreat to quiet corners where he could continue his mental experiments, refining the alternating current motor designs that remained his obsession. The rotating magnetic field concept had continued to evolve during his months with Edison, becoming more sophisticated and practical with each iteration. Tesla could now visualize complete alternating current systems, from generation through transmission to end-use applications, with a clarity and detail that surpassed any physical engineering drawings. His mental laboratory had become so advanced that he could test his designs under conditions that would have been impossible to replicate in any physical facility. He could observe the behavior of his imaginary machines under extreme loads, analyze their performance over extended periods, and identify potential failure modes before they occurred in reality. This extraordinary ability to perfect his designs mentally before building physical prototypes would prove crucial when Tesla finally found the opportunity to demonstrate his innovations. Unlike other inventors who required extensive trial and error experimentation, Tesla would be able to construct working devices that operated flawlessly on the first attempt. The breakthrough that would lift Tesla from poverty and obscurity came through an unexpected connection. A foreman who had observed Tesla's work habits during his ditch-digging period was impressed by the immigrant's obvious intelligence and education. When the foreman learned that Tesla was actually a trained electrical engineer, he mentioned Tesla's situation to a patent attorney named Lemuel Sorel. Sorel was intrigued by reports of an unemployed electrical engineer who claimed to have developed revolutionary motor designs. The patent attorney arranged to meet with Tesla, hoping to evaluate whether the young immigrant's innovations might have commercial value. The meeting between Tesla and Sorel took place in the attorney's modest office in Lower Manhattan. Tesla, wearing his cleanest but increasingly worn clothing, presented himself with the dignity that never abandoned him, regardless of his circumstances. When Sorel asked him to describe his electrical innovations, Tesla launched into an explanation of alternating current principles that revealed the depth and sophistication of his understanding. But Sorel was a practical man who dealt in commercial realities rather than theoretical possibilities. He interrupted Tesla's technical exposition to ask the crucial question that would determine whether their conversation had any value. Can you build a working model of this motor you're describing? Tesla's response demonstrated the confidence that had sustained him through months of poverty and disappointment. Give me access to a basic machine shop and the necessary materials, and I will construct a motor that operates exactly as I have described. It will run smoothly, efficiently, and without the brushes or commutators that limit existing designs. Searle recognized that Tesla's claims, if true, could represent innovations of enormous commercial value. Alternating current technology was beginning to attract attention from electrical engineers who understood its theoretical advantages over direct current systems. A practical alternating current motor could be the key to unlocking the commercial potential of an entirely new approach to electrical power. The patent attorney agreed to provide Tesla with access to a machine shop and the materials needed to construct a prototype of his rotating magnetic field motor. In return, Tesla would assign the patent rights to Searle, who would handle the legal and commercial development of the innovations. Tesla threw himself into the construction work with the focused intensity that characterized all his efforts. Working in a small machine shop in Lower Manhattan, he began translating the mental designs he had perfected over years of visualization into physical reality. The process was unlike anything the shop's other workers had ever witnessed. Tesla worked without detailed drawings, instead constructing each component according to specifications that seemed to exist only in his mind. His movements were precise and confident, as if he were assembling a machine he had built 100 times before. The rotating magnetic field motor that emerged from Tesla's work was a marvel of elegant simplicity. Unlike existing motors that required complex brush and commutator systems to transfer electrical energy to rotating parts, Tesla's design used stationary windings to create a magnetic field that rotated in space. A simple rotor placed within this rotating field was induced to spin without any physical contact with the stationary components. When Tesla first energized his prototype motor, the results exceeded even his own expectations. The machine ran with a smoothness and efficiency that made existing motors seem primitive by comparison. There were no sparks, no brush noise, no irregular motion. The rotor simply began to spin with perfect smoothness the moment Tesla applied alternating current to the stationary windings. The demonstration of Tesla's motor marked a turning point, not only in his personal fortunes, but in the entire development of electrical technology. The device proved conclusively that alternating current could be used to create practical motors that were superior in every way to existing direct current designs. Word of Tesla's achievement began to spread through the small community of electrical engineers and investors who were following developments in alternating current technology. Among those who heard reports of the revolutionary motor was George Westinghouse, an industrial titan who had built his fortune on railway air brake systems and who was now seeking to enter the electrical power industry. Westinghouse understood immediately that Tesla's motor could be the foundation for an alternating current electrical system that would be superior to anything Edison's direct current technology could offer. The rotating magnetic field principle solved the fundamental problem that had prevented alternating current from achieving commercial success. The stage was set for a meeting between Tesla and Westinghouse that would transform both men's lives and determine the future of electrical power throughout the world. Tesla's years of poverty and struggle were about to end, but they would be replaced by challenges of a different kind, as he found himself at the center of the greatest technological battle of the industrial age. The War of the Currents was about to begin in earnest, with Tesla's alternating current innovations providing the weapons that would ultimately defeat Edison's direct current empire. But victory would come at a cost that Tesla could never have anticipated, and the price of changing the world would test every aspect of his extraordinary character. The meeting that would alter the course of technological history took place on a crisp autumn afternoon in 1888 at Westinghouse's Pittsburgh headquarters. Tesla arrived carrying a small wooden crate containing a working model of his rotating magnetic field motor, the same device that had emerged from months of painstaking construction in that modest Manhattan machine shop. As he was escorted through the imposing corridors of the Westinghouse Electric Company, Tesla could feel the weight of destiny pressing upon his shoulders. George Westinghouse was a man who understood the language of innovation in ways that Thomas Edison never could. Where Edison approached invention as a series of practical problems to be solved through exhaustive experimentation, Westinghouse possessed the vision to recognize revolutionary technologies that could transform entire industries. His fortune had been built on his ability to identify breakthrough innovations and develop them into commercial empires. When Tesla was ushered into Westinghouse's private office, the contrast between the two men was immediately apparent. Westinghouse was robust and confident, a successful industrialist who carried himself with the assurance of someone accustomed to making decisions that affected thousands of workers and millions of dollars. Tesla, still bearing the marks of his recent poverty, was tall and aristocratic despite his worn clothing, his dark eyes burning with the intensity of a man who carried within his mind the blueprints for the future. Westinghouse wasted no time on pleasantries. He had heard reports of Tesla's motor from associates who moved in electrical engineering circles, and he wanted to see for himself whether the device lived up to its extraordinary reputation. Tesla carefully unpacked his prototype, explaining the principles of rotating magnetic fields as he connected the motor to a source of alternating current. The demonstration that followed was nothing short of magical. As Tesla energized the motor, the rotor began to spin with the smooth, silent efficiency that had amazed everyone who witnessed it. There were no sparks, no mechanical noise, no irregular motion. The device simply transformed electrical energy into mechanical motion, with a perfection that seemed to violate everything that existing motor technology suggested was possible. But Westinghouse's interest went far beyond the immediate technical achievement. He understood that Tesla's motor solved the fundamental problem that had prevented alternating current from achieving widespread commercial adoption. Previous attempts to develop alternating current systems had founded on the inability to create practical motors that could convert alternating electrical energy into useful mechanical work. "Mr. Tesla," Westinghouse said after observing the motor's operation for several minutes, "you have just shown me the missing piece of a puzzle that I have been trying to solve for years. This motor makes alternating current practical for every application that currently requires direct current, and it opens possibilities that direct current systems could never achieve." Tesla's response revealed both his technical brilliance and his growing understanding of commercial realities. He explained that the rotating magnetic field motor was only one component of a complete alternating current system that he had developed in his mind. He described generators that could produce alternating current more efficiently than any existing direct current machines, transformers that could change voltage levels to optimize transmission efficiency, and distribution systems that could carry electrical power across vast distances with minimal loss. The scope of Tesla's vision astounded even Westinghouse, who had thought in terms of improving existing electrical technologies rather than replacing them entirely. Tesla was proposing nothing less than a complete revolution in electrical power generation, transmission, and utilization. The alternating current system he described would make it possible to build power stations in remote locations where fuel was cheap and plentiful, then transmit that energy to distant cities with unprecedented efficiency. Westinghouse recognized immediately that Tesla's innovations could provide the foundation for an electrical empire that would dwarf anything Edison had built. Direct current systems were inherently limited to serving small areas around centralized power stations. Alternating current technology could make electrical power available anywhere that transmission lines could reach. The negotiations that followed were unlike anything in Tesla's previous experience. Where Edison had dismissed his innovations as impractical dreams, Westinghouse treated them as valuable commercial assets worthy of substantial investment. The industrial titan was prepared to pay not just for Tesla's existing patents, but for his future innovations and his personal services as a consulting engineer. The terms of the agreement that emerged from these discussions would make Tesla wealthy beyond his most optimistic dreams. Westinghouse offered $1 million for Tesla's alternating current patents, plus additional royalties for every motor manufactured using Tesla's designs. In an era when skilled workers earned less than $1,000 per year, the offer represented financial security that would last several lifetimes. But perhaps more importantly for Tesla, the agreement provided him with access to the resources and facilities he needed to develop his innovations fully. Westinghouse's laboratories were equipped with the finest electrical equipment available, and his manufacturing facilities could produce Tesla's motors and generators on a scale that would make alternating current commercially competitive with Edison's direct current systems. Tesla's acceptance of Westinghouse's offer marked the beginning of the most productive period of his career. Working in the well-equipped laboratories of the Westinghouse Electric Company, he began translating years of mental experiments into physical reality. The rotating magnetic field motor that had existed only in his imagination became a production device that could be manufactured efficiently and reliably. But the motor was only the beginning. Tesla's mind contained complete specifications for generators, transformers, transmission systems, and control devices that would make alternating current practical for every conceivable application. Each innovation built upon the others, creating an integrated technological system that was superior to existing electrical infrastructure in every measurable way. The development work proceeded with a speed that amazed even Westinghouse's experienced engineers. Where conventional development projects might require years of experimental work, Tesla's designs moved from concept to production readiness in a matter of months. His extraordinary ability to perfect innovations mentally before constructing physical prototypes eliminated the trial and error process that consumed most engineering development efforts. As word of Tesla's innovations spread through the electrical industry, the response was immediate and dramatic. Engineers who had dismissed alternating current as impractical suddenly recognized its revolutionary potential. Investors who had avoided alternating current investments began redirecting their capital toward Westinghouse's expanding operations. But the most significant reaction came from Thomas Edison, who understood that Tesla's innovations represented an existential threat to his electrical empire. Edison's direct current systems had generated enormous profits and established him as the most famous inventor in America. The success of alternating current technology would render his investments worthless and destroy his reputation as the leading electrical pioneer. Edison's response was swift and ruthless. He launched a public campaign designed to discredit alternating current technology by emphasizing its dangers and questioning its reliability. The campaign would become known as the War of the Currents, and it would determine whether the world would be powered by Edison's direct current or Tesla's alternating current systems. The stakes of this conflict extended far beyond the commercial interests of Edison and Westinghouse. The electrical technology that emerged victorious would determine the structure of electrical infrastructure for generations to come. It would affect the location of power stations, the design of transmission systems, and the availability of electrical service in rural areas that were too distant from direct current power stations to receive service. Tesla found himself at the center of this technological battle, but he was ill prepared for the vicious personal attacks that Edison's campaign would unleash. The immigrant engineer, who had devoted his life to the pursuit of scientific truth, was about to discover that commercial success often required skills that had nothing to do with technical innovation. Edison's strategy was based on the premise that public fear of alternating current could be manipulated to preserve his direct current monopoly. He organized public demonstrations designed to prove that alternating current was too dangerous for commercial use, electrocuting animals to show the lethal potential of Tesla's innovations. The most notorious of these demonstrations involved the execution of Topsy, an elephant at Luna Park in Coney Island. Edison's associates arranged for the animal to be killed using alternating current, then filmed the execution to create propaganda material that could be shown to potential customers and government officials. These macabre spectacles were scientifically meaningless, since direct current could be equally lethal under the right conditions. but they were emotionally powerful, creating associations between alternating current and death that Edison hoped would overcome the technical advantages of Tesla's innovations. Tesla was appalled by the ethical implications of Edison's campaign. The man who had devoted his life to harnessing electrical forces for the benefit of humanity was forced to watch as his innovations were portrayed as instruments of death and destruction. The attack struck at the very core of Tesla's identity as an inventor whose work was intended to improve the human condition. The psychological toll of the war of the currents began to manifest in Tesla's behavior and health. His nervous sensitivities, which had been manageable during periods of focused technical work, became more pronounced under the stress of public controversy. The constant attacks on his character and innovations triggered obsessive behaviors that interfered with his ability to concentrate on engineering problems. But Tesla's response to adversity revealed the strength of character that had sustained him through years of poverty and rejection. Rather than retreat from the controversy, he threw himself into developing even more impressive demonstrations of alternating currents capabilities. If Edison wanted to wage a public battle over electrical technology, Tesla would prove his innovations through spectacular displays that no amount of propaganda could discredit. The opportunity for such a demonstration came when the organizers of the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago announced their intention to illuminate the entire fairgrounds with electric lighting. The contract for this massive project would serve as a proving ground for competing electrical technologies, with the winning system likely to dominate electrical development for decades to come. Edison's General Electric Company submitted a bid based on direct current technology that would have required multiple power stations throughout the fairgrounds due to the limited transmission range of low-voltage direct current systems. The complexity and cost of this approach made their bid prohibitively expensive. Westinghouse and Tesla responded with a proposal that demonstrated the revolutionary advantages of alternating current technology. A single power station using Tesla's generators could illuminate the entire exposition through high-voltage transmission lines that carried power efficiently across long distances. The cost savings were so dramatic that Westinghouse could underbid Edison by nearly half while still maintaining substantial profit margins. When Westinghouse won the contract, it represented more than a commercial victory. The World's Columbian Exposition would provide Tesla with the opportunity to demonstrate alternating current technology to millions of visitors from around the world. The success or failure of this demonstration would determine the outcome of the war of the currents. Tesla understood that the exposition represented the most important test of his career. Everything he had worked toward since that evening walk in Budapest, when he first envisioned the rotating magnetic field motor, would be judged by the performance of his electrical systems under the most demanding conditions imaginable. The pressure was enormous, but Tesla approached the challenge with the confidence that had sustained him through every previous crisis. He had spent years perfecting his innovations in the laboratory of his mind, testing them under conditions far more demanding than anything the exposition could present. He knew his systems would work flawlessly, but he also understood that the world was watching, and failure would mean the end of his dreams of electrical revolution. As construction began on the exposition's electrical infrastructure, Tesla worked with an intensity that amazed even the engineers who had grown accustomed to his extraordinary dedication. Every component of the system was tested and retested to ensure perfect reliability. Every connection was checked multiple times to eliminate any possibility of failure. The rotating magnetic field motors that would power the exposition's fountains and machinery were manufactured to tolerances that exceeded anything previously achieved in electrical equipment. The generators that would supply power to the entire fairgrounds incorporated innovations that Tesla had developed specifically for this application. As opening day approached, Tesla knew that he stood on the threshold of either his greatest triumph or his most devastating defeat. The alternating current system that had existed only in his imagination for so many years was about to be tested before the entire world. The boy who had once watched lightning storms with wonder was about to illuminate the largest electrical display in human history. The success of his demonstration would determine not only his own fate, but the electrical future of civilization itself. The opening ceremony of the World's Columbian Exposition took place on a warm evening in May of 1893, as hundreds of thousands of visitors gathered in expectation of witnessing something that had never been attempted before. Tesla stood in the main control room, his tall frame silhouetted against banks of switches and gauges that monitored the massive electrical system he had designed. His hands, which had once created sparks with a cat's fur in his childhood home, now rested on controls that would command enough electrical power to illuminate an entire city. The moment of truth arrived as the sun set over Lake Michigan, casting the exposition grounds into darkness. Tesla received the signal from the ceremony's organizers and placed his hand on the master switch. In that instant, as current flowed through the miles of wire and countless connections that comprised his alternating current system, 27 million visitors witnessed the birth of the electrical age. The fairgrounds erupted in brilliant white light as thousands of incandescent bulbs blazed to life simultaneously. The Palace of Electricity, Tesla's showcase building, became a cathedral of illumination that could be seen for miles across the lake. Fountains danced with electrically powered precision, while machinery hummed with the smooth efficiency that only alternating current motors could provide. The entire exposition had been transformed into a wonderland of electrical marvels that seemed to fulfill humanity's most ambitious dreams about the power of technology. But the visual spectacle was only part of Tesla's triumph. The electrical system operated with a reliability and efficiency that surpassed even his own optimistic projections. For 6 months, as millions of visitors explored the exposition, Tesla's alternating current infrastructure provided uninterrupted power without a single significant failure. The rotating magnetic field motors that he had first envisioned during that evening walk in Budapest proved their superiority over every existing electrical technology. The success of the exposition marked the decisive victory in the War of the Currents. Edison's direct current technology, which had once seemed destined to power the modern world, was revealed as a technological dead end by comparison with Tesla's innovations. Orders for alternating current equipment poured into the Westinghouse factories as utilities around the world recognized the economic advantages of Tesla's approach to electrical power generation and transmission. Tesla found himself celebrated as the electrical wizard who had made the impossible seem routine. Newspapers described him as the master of lightning who had harnessed the very forces of nature to serve human needs. Scientific journals published detailed analyses of his innovations, establishing his reputation among electrical engineers as the most brilliant inventor of his generation. But even as Tesla basked in the recognition that his life's work had finally received, his restless mind was already moving beyond the alternating current systems that had made him famous. The success of the exposition had proven that electrical power could be generated, transmitted, and utilized on a scale that transformed entire cities. Now Tesla began to envision possibilities that extended far beyond conventional electrical infrastructure. During the months following the exposition's close, Tesla immersed himself in experiments that pushed the boundaries of electrical science into realms that seemed to border on magic. Working in his new laboratory on South Fifth Avenue in New York, he began exploring the behavior of electrical forces at frequencies far higher than those used in conventional power systems. These high-frequency investigations led Tesla into discoveries that would establish entirely new fields of electrical engineering. He found that alternating currents at extremely high frequencies behaved according to principles that classical electrical theory could not explain. These currents would flow along the surfaces of conductors rather than through their interiors, and they could be transmitted through space without the need for connecting wires. The implications of these discoveries were staggering. Tesla realized that electrical energy could be transmitted wirelessly across vast distances, making it possible to provide power to any location on Earth without the need for transmission lines. Ships at sea could receive electrical power from land-based stations. Remote communities that were too isolated for conventional electrical service could be supplied with unlimited energy. But Tesla's wireless power concepts extended even beyond these revolutionary applications. He theorized that the Earth itself could serve as a conductor for electrical energy, allowing power generated at a single location to be accessed anywhere on the planet. A massive transmitting station could supply electrical energy to receivers located thousands of miles away, making it possible to eliminate the entire infrastructure of power lines and distribution systems that characterized conventional electrical service. These ideas were so far ahead of their time that Tesla struggled to find collaborators who could understand their significance. The electrical engineers who had finally accepted alternating current technology were not prepared to contemplate wireless power transmission that seemed to violate fundamental laws of physics. Tesla found himself once again in the position of a visionary whose insights transcended the comprehension of his contemporaries. The isolation was compounded by Tesla's increasingly eccentric behavior, which had become more pronounced as he aged. His nervous sensitivities had evolved into elaborate rituals and compulsions that governed every aspect of his daily life. He required exactly 18 napkins at every meal, calculated the cubic contents of food before eating it, and refused to touch anything that was not perfectly clean. These peculiarities, combined with his growing reputation as an impractical dreamer, made it difficult for him to maintain the professional relationships that were essential for developing his wireless power concepts. Tesla's personal life remained as solitary as it had been throughout his career. He had never married, claiming that romantic attachments would interfere with his scientific work. His relationships with women were characterized by gallant admiration from a distance rather than intimate companionship. He formed deep friendships with a few individuals who could appreciate his genius, but most of his emotional energy was channeled into his scientific pursuits. The financial rewards from his alternating current patents had made Tesla independently wealthy, but money meant little to him beyond its ability to fund his research. He lived simply, preferring the intellectual stimulation of his laboratory to the social pleasures that wealth could provide. His true satisfaction came from the moments of discovery when a new principle revealed itself to his understanding, or when a long-pursued experiment finally yielded the results he had predicted. As the 19th century drew to a close, Tesla's reputation had evolved from that of a practical inventor to something approaching a mystical figure who seemed to commune with forces beyond ordinary human understanding. His public lectures drew capacity crowds who came to witness demonstrations that appeared to violate the laws of nature. Tesla would illuminate wireless lamps by standing in electrical fields that would have been lethal to ordinary mortals, manipulating invisible forces with a control that seemed supernatural. These demonstrations were not mere showmanship, but carefully designed experiments that revealed principles of electrical behavior that conventional science had not yet recognized. Tesla understood that high-frequency alternating currents affected the human body differently than the lower frequencies used in power systems, allowing him to safely interact with electrical fields that would have been dangerous under other circumstances. His most spectacular demonstration involved the wireless transmission of electrical energy across his laboratory. Tesla constructed a massive coil that could generate electrical oscillations at extraordinarily high frequencies, creating standing wave patterns that filled the entire room with invisible electrical energy. Wireless lamps placed anywhere within the laboratory would glow brightly when the coil was energized, powered by energy that reached them through space rather than through connecting wires. These experiments proved conclusively that electrical energy could be transmitted without wires, but they also revealed the enormous technical challenges that would need to be overcome before wireless power transmission could become practical on a global scale. The amount of energy required to create useful power levels at distant locations was far greater than any existing electrical system could provide. Tesla's response to this challenge was characteristically ambitious. Rather than accepting the limitations of existing technology, he began planning a wireless power transmission facility that would operate on a scale unprecedented in electrical engineering. The project would require more financial resources than Tesla possessed, forcing him to seek investors who shared his vision of wireless energy transmission. The search for funding brought Tesla into contact with some of the most powerful financiers in America, including J. Pierpont Morgan, the banking titan who controlled vast industrial empires. Tesla's reputation as the inventor of alternating current technology gave him access to these influential figures, but convincing them to invest in wireless power transmission would require all of his persuasive abilities. Tesla understood that his wireless power concepts were so far beyond current understanding that they would seem like fantasy to practical businessmen. He needed to present his ideas in terms that emphasized their commercial potential rather than their scientific audacity. The challenge was to communicate revolutionary possibilities in language that conservative investors could comprehend and evaluate. The meeting that would determine the fate of Tesla's wireless power dreams took place in J. Pierpont Morgan's imposing office in Lower Manhattan during the winter of 1900. Tesla arrived carrying detailed plans for a global wireless communication and power transmission system that would revolutionize human civilization in ways that even the alternating current revolution had not achieved. Morgan listened with the calculating attention of a man who had built his fortune by recognizing opportunities that others missed. Tesla described a world where information and energy could be transmitted instantaneously to any location on Earth, where geographical barriers would no longer limit human communication or access to electrical power. Ships crossing the ocean would remain in constant contact with shore stations while receiving the electrical energy needed to power their systems. The vision Tesla presented was breathtaking in its scope and implications. A network of wireless transmission stations could provide every human being on Earth with access to unlimited information and energy, creating a global civilization united by invisible bonds of electrical communication. The economic benefits would be enormous, as entire industries would be transformed by the availability of wireless power and communication services. Morgan's response revealed both his business acumen and his limited understanding of the technical challenges involved in Tesla's proposals. The financier was intrigued by the commercial possibilities of wireless communication, which clearly had enormous market potential. But he was skeptical about wireless power transmission, which seemed to violate basic economic principles by making electrical energy freely available to anyone with a receiving apparatus. The negotiations that followed were complex and difficult, as Tesla struggled to explain technical concepts that had no parallel in existing business experience. Morgan wanted exclusive control over any wireless communication systems that Tesla developed, seeing them as potential sources of enormous profits. But he was reluctant to invest in wireless power transmission research that might make electrical energy so widely available that it could not be sold profitably. Tesla's eagerness to begin work on his wireless transmission project led him to accept terms that would later prove problematic. In exchange for funding to build an experimental wireless station, Tesla granted Morgan significant control over his future innovations and patents. The agreement would provide the resources needed to test wireless transmission concepts, but it would also limit Tesla's freedom to develop his ideas according to his own vision. The location chosen for Tesla's experimental wireless station was a remote area of Long Island called Wardenclyffe, where he could conduct high-power electrical experiments without interference from nearby population centers. The facility that Tesla designed for this site was unlike anything that had ever been constructed, featuring a massive tower surrounded by an underground network of electrical conductors that would interact with the Earth's natural electrical properties. Construction of the Wardenclyffe facility began in 1901, as Tesla threw himself into the project with the passionate intensity that had characterized all of his most important work. The tower that rose from the Long Island landscape was intended to serve as both a wireless communication station and a power transmission facility that could supply electrical energy to receivers located anywhere in the world. Tesla's vision for Wardenclyffe extended far beyond simple wireless telegraphy or power transmission. He envisioned the facility as the prototype for a global network that would unite humanity through instantaneous communication and unlimited access to electrical energy. The implications for human civilization were profound, as geographical isolation would no longer limit access to information or technology. But as construction progressed, the enormous technical challenges involved in wireless power transmission became increasingly apparent. The amount of electrical energy required to create useful power levels at distant locations far exceeded Tesla's initial calculations. The project demanded innovations in high-power electrical generation that pushed beyond the limits of existing technology. Tesla's response to these challenges revealed both his genius and his growing detachment from practical constraints. Rather than scaling back his ambitions to match available resources, he expanded the project's scope to include even more revolutionary applications. Wardenclyffe would not merely transmit power and communications, but would also provide wireless control systems for ships and aircraft, weather modification capabilities, and even defensive applications that could protect the United States from foreign invasion. These grandiose expansions of the project's objectives alarmed Morgan and other investors who had expected a focused development of wireless communication technology. Tesla's reputation as a practical inventor was being overshadowed by perceptions that he had become an impractical dreamer whose projects consumed enormous resources without producing marketable results. The financial pressures created by Wardenclyffe's escalating costs began to affect every aspect of Tesla's life and work. The wealthy inventor, who had enjoyed financial independence since the success of his alternating current patents, found himself struggling to maintain funding for the increasingly expensive wireless transmission experiments. Tesla's health began to deteriorate under the stress of the project's mounting problems. His nervous sensitivities became more pronounced, manifesting in obsessive behaviors that interfered with his ability to work effectively. The isolation of the Long Island laboratory, which had initially seemed ideal for conducting undisturbed research, became a source of loneliness that compounded his other difficulties. The combination of technical challenges, financial pressures, and personal isolation created a perfect storm that would ultimately destroy Tesla's dreams of wireless power transmission. The man, who had once illuminated the world's Columbian Exposition, was about to experience the most devastating failure of his career, a setback that would haunt him for the rest of his life. But even as Wardenclyffe consumed his resources and energy, Tesla's fertile mind continued to generate innovations that were decades ahead of their time. His laboratory notebooks from this period contain descriptions of technologies that would not become practical until the late 20th century, including concepts that would eventually lead to radio, television, radar, and computer networks. The tragic irony of Tesla's situation was that his greatest visionary insights were emerging just as his ability to develop them was being undermined by the very ambition that had driven his entire career. The man who had given the world alternating current was reaching toward achievements that would dwarf even that revolutionary contribution. But the path to those achievements led through challenges that would test the limits of human endurance and determination. As 1906 dawned, Tesla stood at Wardenclyffe, watching the sunrise illuminate his unfinished tower, knowing that he was running out of time and resources to complete the project that represented the culmination of his life's work. The boy who had once marveled at lightning storms was about to discover that some forces of nature resist even the most brilliant attempts to harness them. The isolation of Wardenclyffe during those final years became a reflection of Tesla's own growing detachment from the world around him. The laboratory that had once buzzed with the energy of revolutionary experimentation grew quiet, its corridors echoing with the footsteps of a man who spent increasingly long hours walking among his silent machines. The assistants who had once worked alongside him had been dismissed as funding dwindled, leaving Tesla alone with his thoughts and his gradually failing equipment. During the long winter nights of 1907, Tesla would often stand in the main laboratory, surrounded by the towering coils and complex apparatus that represented decades of innovative work. The wireless transmission equipment that had once crackled with high-frequency energy now stood dormant, its copper conductors tarnished, and its connections slowly corroding in the humid Long Island air. The silence was profound, broken only by the distant sound of wind whistling through the gaps in the tower structure above. Tesla's financial situation had deteriorated beyond anything he could have imagined during his prosperous years with Westinghouse. The royalties from his alternating current patents, which had once seemed like an endless source of income, were no longer sufficient to maintain the expensive research that Wardenclyffe demanded. His requests for additional funding from Morgan and other investors were met with increasing skepticism as the promised results failed to materialize within acceptable timeframes. The psychological toll of these mounting pressures began to manifest in ways that concerned even Tesla's closest associates. His already pronounced obsessive behaviors became more elaborate and time-consuming, requiring hours of ritualistic preparation before he could begin any meaningful work. The precise habits that had once helped him focus his extraordinary mental abilities were becoming barriers that prevented him from functioning effectively. His appearance during this period reflected the internal struggles that consumed his energy. The tall, aristocratic bearing that had once commanded respect in scientific circles became increasingly gaunt and fragile. His clothes, while still meticulously maintained according to his exacting standards, hung loosely on his diminishing frame. The dark eyes that had once burned with visionary intensity now carried a haunted quality that spoke of dreams deferred and opportunities lost. Yet even in these desperate circumstances, Tesla's mind continued to generate innovations that were decades ahead of their time. Working alone in the Wardenclyffe laboratory, he developed concepts for remote control systems that would eventually lead to guided missiles and unmanned aircraft. He envisioned communication networks that could carry not just voice messages, but moving pictures and vast amounts of data, ideas that would not become reality until the advent of television and computer networks. His notebook entries from this period reveal a mind grappling with possibilities that seem to border on science fiction. Tesla described systems for transmitting electrical power through the upper atmosphere, using the ionized layers that surround the Earth as natural conductors. He outlined methods for controlling weather patterns through strategic application of electrical energy, and he theorized about communication systems that could reach other planets. These extraordinary visions, however, remained trapped within the confines of Tesla's imagination, as the practical resources needed to test and develop them continued to evaporate. The gap between his conceptual breakthroughs and his ability to demonstrate them physically grew wider with each passing month. The beginning of the end for Wardenclyffe came in 1909, when Morgan finally withdrew his support entirely. The financier had grown tired of funding experiments that seemed to promise everything but deliver nothing of immediate commercial value. Tesla's attempts to secure alternative funding proved futile, as his reputation had shifted from that of a practical inventor to an impractical dreamer whose projects consumed vast resources without producing marketable results. The forced closure of Wardenclyffe represented more than just the end of a research project. It symbolized the failure of Tesla's most ambitious attempt to reshape human civilization through the application of electrical technology. The global wireless communication and power network that he had envisioned would not emerge until decades later, developed by other inventors who built upon foundations that Tesla had established but could not complete. Tesla's response to this devastating setback revealed both his resilience and his growing detachment from practical concerns. Rather than abandoning his wireless transmission research entirely, he redirected his efforts towards smaller-scale projects that could be pursued with minimal resources. Working from a series of modest laboratories in New York City, he continued to develop innovations in wireless communication and remote control technology. The years following the Wardenclyffe closure were marked by a series of remarkable achievements that demonstrated Tesla's undiminished inventive capabilities despite his reduced circumstances. He developed the first practical remote control devices, demonstrating wireless-controlled boats and automobiles that amazed audiences who witnessed their operation. These innovations laid the groundwork for technologies that would become essential components of modern warfare and civilian transportation. Tesla's work on high-frequency electrical phenomena during this period also contributed to the development of radio technology, although his theoretical approach differed significantly from the methods employed by other wireless pioneers like Marconi. Tesla understood radio transmission as a manifestation of the same principles that governed his wireless power concepts, while other inventors treated it as a purely communication phenomenon. The recognition that Tesla received for these later innovations was significant but bittersweet. Scientific institutions honored him with awards and honorary degrees that acknowledged his contributions to electrical science, but the commercial success that had once seemed within his grasp remained elusive. The man who had revolutionized electrical power generation found himself increasingly relegated to the role of an honored but largely irrelevant figure from an earlier era of invention. Tesla's personal life during these years became increasingly solitary and ritualized. He lived alone in a series of modest hotels, maintaining the elaborate daily routines that had governed his behavior for decades. His meals were consumed at precise times with exact quantities of food calculated according to formulas that only he understood. His walks through the city followed specific routes that never varied, and his interactions with other people were limited to brief, formal exchanges. Yet beneath this exterior of rigid control, Tesla's mind remained as active and inventive as ever. He continued to visualize complex machines and systems with the same extraordinary clarity that had characterized his mental abilities since childhood. The laboratory of his imagination continued to operate at full capacity, even when he lacked the resources to build physical versions of his innovations. During his evening walks through Central Park, Tesla would often pause to feed the pigeons that gathered around the benches where he rested. These creatures became his primary companions during his later years, and he developed deep emotional attachments to individual birds that he could recognize among the flocks. The man who had once commanded the attention of industrial titans and scientific luminaries found comfort in the simple act of caring for these urban wildlife. One particular pigeon, a white female with distinctive markings, became the focus of Tesla's most intense emotional connection during his final decades. He would spend hours each day ensuring that this bird received proper nutrition and care, and he claimed to understand her communications in ways that seemed to transcend normal human-animal interactions. When this beloved companion finally died, Tesla described the loss in terms that suggested he had experienced something approaching a spiritual revelation. Tesla's scientific work during his final years continued to push the boundaries of what seemed possible, even as his ability to develop and demonstrate his innovations remained severely limited. He outlined concepts for particle beam weapons that could defend nations against aerial attack, wireless power transmission systems that could supply energy to vehicles in motion, and communication technologies that could provide global coverage through networks of synchronized transmitters. These ideas, while far ahead of their time, were often dismissed by the scientific establishment as the fantasies of an aging inventor whose greatest achievements lay in the past. Tesla's presentations to scientific societies were attended more out of respect for his historical contributions than from any expectation that his new proposals would prove practical or significant. The isolation that characterized Tesla's later years was compounded by the rapid advancement of electrical technology along lines that differed significantly from his original visions. The alternating current systems that had made his reputation were being superseded by more sophisticated approaches that incorporated innovations he had not anticipated. The wireless communication networks that emerged during the early 20th century followed development paths that bore little resemblance to his global transmission concepts. Tesla watched these developments with a mixture of satisfaction and frustration. He took pride in the knowledge that his fundamental contributions to alternating current technology had made possible the electrical infrastructure that was transforming human civilization. But he also felt the sting of seeing other inventors receive credit for innovations that built upon principles he had established decades earlier. The financial struggles that had begun with the closure of Wardenclyffe continued to plague Tesla throughout his later years. The royalties from his early patents had long since expired, and his more recent innovations had failed to generate significant commercial returns. He was forced to rely on modest consulting fees and occasional speaking engagements to support his increasingly frugal lifestyle. Tesla's living quarters during his final decades reflected his reduced circumstances while maintaining the obsessive attention to cleanliness and order that had always characterized his personal habits. His hotel rooms were sparsely furnished but meticulously organized, with every object positioned according to precise rules that governed his daily routines. The contrast between his current modest accommodations and the luxurious laboratories he had once commanded served as a constant reminder of opportunities lost and dreams unfulfilled. Yet even in these humble surroundings, Tesla's mind continued to generate innovations that would not be fully understood or appreciated until decades after his death. His theoretical work on the relationship between matter and energy anticipated developments in nuclear physics that would not emerge until the middle of the 20th century. His concepts for wireless communication networks described systems that would not become practical until the development of satellite technology and global computer networks. The recognition that Tesla received during his lifetime for these later theoretical contributions was limited but significant. A small circle of scientists and engineers understood the importance of his insights into high-frequency electrical phenomena and wireless transmission principles. These admirers worked to ensure that Tesla's contributions would not be forgotten, even as his influence on contemporary technological development continued to diminish. Tesla's relationship with the press during his later years was complex and often problematic. Reporters were fascinated by his eccentric personality and his reputation as an electrical wizard, but they often sensationalized his statements and misrepresented his technical innovations. Tesla's tendency to describe his inventions in grandiose terms made him an easy target for journalists who were more interested in creating entertaining stories than in accurately conveying scientific information. The public perception of Tesla that emerged from this media coverage was that of a mad scientist whose claims about wireless power transmission and particle beam weapons placed him on the borderline between genius and delusion. This characterization, while unfair and inaccurate, became so firmly established that it continued to influence Tesla's reputation long after his death. Tesla's response to this misrepresentation was characteristic of his lifelong approach to public relations. He refused to modify his technical presentations to make them more accessible to general audiences, and he declined to engage in the kind of promotional activities that might have improved his public image. His commitment to scientific truth remained absolute, even when that commitment worked against his practical interests. As Tesla entered his 80s, the physical toll of decades of intense mental work and personal isolation became increasingly apparent. His health, which had never been robust, began to deteriorate in ways that interfered with his ability to continue his research. The nervous sensitivities that had always characterized his personality became more pronounced, making it difficult for him to tolerate the noise and confusion of urban life. Despite these mounting challenges, Tesla's mental faculties remained remarkably sharp throughout his final years. Visitors to his modest hotel room were amazed by his ability to discuss complex technical subjects with the same clarity and insight that had made him famous decades earlier. His memory for technical details remained virtually perfect, and his capacity for visualizing complex systems showed no signs of diminishing with age. Tesla's final public appearances were marked by a dignity and grace that impressed even those who questioned the practical value of his later innovations. He spoke with the authority of someone who had witnessed and participated in the transformation of human civilization through electrical technology. His reflections on the changes he had seen during his lifetime provided unique insights into the development of modern industrial society. The man who had once harnessed lightning was approaching the end of his remarkable journey, but his legacy would prove to be far more enduring than even he might have imagined. The technologies he had pioneered would continue to evolve and expand, ultimately reaching levels of sophistication that would have seemed magical even to Tesla's extraordinary imagination. As the world moved toward another global conflict that would accelerate technological development in unprecedented ways, Tesla's contributions to the foundation of modern electrical civilization would prove to be more valuable than ever. The alternating current systems that had made his reputation would power the industrial production that would determine the outcome of World War II. The wireless communication principles he had established would evolve into radar systems that would prove crucial to military success. But perhaps most importantly, Tesla's approach to invention and innovation would inspire future generations of scientists and engineers who would carry forward his vision of technology serving humanity's highest aspirations. The boy who had watched lightning storms with wonder had grown into a man who had captured that very lightning and taught the world to use it for the betterment of human civilization. The betterment of human civilization. Tesla's final years unfolded in the New Yorker hotel, where he occupied a modest suite on the 33rd floor that became both sanctuary and prison for one of history's greatest minds. The rooms were sparse, yet meticulously arranged, according to the elaborate system of organization that had governed his life for decades. Each morning, he would rise at precisely the same hour, perform his ritualistic ablutions with mathematical precision, and prepare for another day of solitary contemplation and invention. The view from his windows encompassed the sprawling metropolis that his electrical innovations had helped to create. The city that stretched endlessly in all directions was illuminated by alternating current systems that bore his fundamental fingerprints, powered by generators that operated according to principles he had established, connected by distribution networks that embodied technologies he had pioneered. Yet the man who had made this electrical civilization possible lived in increasing isolation from the world his genius had transformed. Tesla's daily routine during these final years became a carefully choreographed performance that he executed with unwavering consistency. His meals were delivered to his room at exact intervals, each portion weighed and measured according to calculations that reflected his lifelong obsession with mathematical precision. The pigeons that gathered on his windowsill provided his primary social interaction, and he would spend hours observing their behavior with the same intense focus that he had once directed toward electrical phenomena. The scientific community's relationship with Tesla during this period was marked by a mixture of reverence and bewilderment. Younger researchers who visited him were astounded by the clarity of his thinking and the breadth of his knowledge, but they struggled to understand the theoretical frameworks that guided his approach to electrical science. Tesla's explanations of his wireless power concepts and particle beam theories seemed to operate according to physical principles that conventional science had not yet recognized or accepted. His correspondence during these years reveals a mind that remained extraordinarily active despite his physical decline. Letters to former colleagues and admirers contain detailed descriptions of innovations that would not become practical until the development of technologies that lay decades in the future. Tesla described communication systems that could transmit not just voice and text, but moving images and vast databases of information, concepts that anticipated the emergence of television broadcasting and computer networks. The theoretical work that Tesla pursued in his hotel room laboratory pushed the boundaries of electrical science into realms that seemed to border on pure mathematics. His notebooks from this period contain equations and diagrams that describe the behavior of electrical energy at frequencies and power levels that no existing equipment could generate or measure. These investigations represented the culmination of a lifetime spent exploring the fundamental nature of electrical phenomena. Tesla's understanding of the relationship between electricity and magnetism had evolved far beyond the practical applications that had made his reputation. He envisioned electrical technologies that could manipulate gravitational forces, transmit energy through dimensions that conventional physics had not recognized, and achieve levels of efficiency that seemed to violate conservation laws. These ideas, while scientifically controversial, reflected the same visionary thinking that had led to his earlier breakthroughs in alternating current technology. The financial struggles that had plagued Tesla since the failure of Wardenclyffe continued to affect every aspect of his existence. The modest pension that he received from the Yugoslav government provided barely enough to cover his basic living expenses, and his pride prevented him from accepting the charitable assistance that admirers occasionally offered. The man who had once commanded enormous royalties from his patents lived his final years in genteel poverty that stood in stark contrast to the wealth that his innovations had generated for others. Tesla's health during this period fluctuated between periods of remarkable vitality and episodes of severe decline that confined him to his bed for days at a time. His nervous system, which had always been unusually sensitive, became increasingly fragile under the accumulated stress of decades of intense mental work. The sensory overload that characterized urban life became almost unbearable, forcing him to retreat into the controlled environment of his hotel suite, where he could maintain the precise conditions necessary for concentration. Despite these mounting challenges, Tesla's capacity for innovation remained undiminished. Working with nothing more than pencil and paper, he continued to develop concepts for technologies that would not become feasible until the emergence of materials and manufacturing techniques that lay far in the future. His designs for wireless power transmission systems incorporated principles of electromagnetic field manipulation that anticipated developments in plasma physics and superconductivity. The isolation that characterized Tesla's final years was broken only by occasional visits from journalists, scientists, and admirers who sought to learn from the legendary inventor. These encounters revealed a man whose intellectual powers remained formidable despite his advancing age and deteriorating circumstances. Visitors were often surprised by Tesla's ability to discuss current developments in electrical engineering with insights that surpassed those of researchers who had access to the most advanced laboratories and equipment. Tesla's reflections on his life's work during these conversations revealed a complex mixture of satisfaction and regret. He took pride in the knowledge that his alternating current systems had made possible the electrical infrastructure that was transforming human civilization. But he also felt frustrated by his inability to complete the wireless power transmission projects that he considered his most important contributions to human progress. The outbreak of World War II brought renewed attention to Tesla's theoretical work on particle beam weapons and defensive electrical systems. Military researchers sought his advice on technologies that might provide advantages in the global conflict. But Tesla's advanced age and declining health limited his ability to participate actively in these development efforts. He could offer insights and theoretical guidance, but the practical work of translating his concepts into functional weapons systems would need to be carried out by younger scientists and engineers. And so, as the winter of 1943 settled over New York City, the man who had once captured lightning in his hands prepared for his final rest. Tesla's extraordinary journey was drawing to its close, but the electrical currents he had set in motion would continue to flow through the world long after his physical form had returned to the elements from which it came. On January 7th, 1943, Nikola Tesla passed away quietly in his hotel room, alone as he had lived for so many years, yet surrounded by the invisible forces he had spent his lifetime understanding and harnessing. The boy who had been born during a thunderstorm had completed his circle, returning to the silence from which all energy emerges and to which it must eventually return. His legacy lives on in every light switch you touch, every motor that hums to life, every wireless signal that carries your voice across impossible distances. Tesla's vision of a world united by electrical energy has become so fundamental to our existence that we can barely imagine life without it. From the device that carries these words to your ears, to the vast networks of power and communication that span our globe, Tesla's fingerprints remain visible on the electrical foundation of modern civilization. Rest now, as Tesla himself has found his eternal rest, knowing that the lightning he once watched with wonder has become humanity's faithful servant, illuminating our darkness and powering our dreams, just as one extraordinary mind always believed it could.